I'm Chuck Strongman. The Horror. This is from my book, Wild and Free on the Lower East Side. 9 true stories from the 70s and 80s in New York City. Waiting for a knock at the door. There's an opening quote by a friend of mine who's dead. Somebody set him on fire. Burned him alive. The quote was, "Waiting for cocaine to satisfy life's desires is like waiting for God to come through the door and take you home. Every time you hear a knock, you get up with a pounding heart, but nobody's there." When I freebased cocaine for at least 3 days straight, I heard knocking at the door. If I didn't hear knocking, I heard fumbling and scratching. Now, usually I hung out naked due to my sweating like a pig in a Texas slaughterhouse. So I'd creep to the door like that, aware of every muscle and every inch of the floor, hoping that my heartbeat and my breathing didn't sound through the walls. I'd throw open the door to a certain and horrible death, but never was anybody or anything out there. In every case, it must have been the proverbial raven entreating entrance. Only this and nothing more. After 9 months of this hyper-alert buffoonery, one day I went to sleep for 2 weeks. Either that or I went over the edge and only thought I'd gone to sleep. Either way, wouldn't you know that during the interval someone broke in and robbed the rest of the cocaine? Murphy's Law. Well, the missing cocaine posed a health hazard. For without it, I couldn't pay the Colombians for the whole batch. That's not good. The Colombian representative came by to get paid, and I related my misfortune to him. He expressed optimistic tolerance due to my favorable financial history, but after a few weeks, a dark countenance came across him. He said he didn't want it to happen to me. It? He said that running wouldn't help, and that someone would come by having no tolerance whatsoever, and that if I were not present when the knock came at the door, affairs would only escalate. So now I needed to sit around waiting for the knock. What joy. Well, then I waited. 3 intolerable weeks passed. I stared at the walls, again imagining a certain and horrible death, but this time hoping that somehow God would show up first. A knock came at last, but it was only a false alarm. The Colombian rep walked in and confirmed his sorrow. "It's out of my hands now," he said, "and I'm sorry. I did all I could." And then he left. More time passed. Then some generous person gave me the required money. I wondered if by now it would make any difference. I doubted it. And I went on waiting. Then it came for real. A thunderous pounding on the door. My personal Colombian brought another one who wore military fatigues and combat boots. And this other one also sported a heavy steel chain hanging around his neck with a large lead ball attached to each end. To pulverize my kneecaps, at least, you know. The 3 of us went quietly into my back room. My Colombian slid back his jacket to expose his .38 caliber revolver, and he delivered a short speech. "You have acquired a debt with us in the amount of $5,100 plus $600 for his trip here today, totaling $5,700. Usually we have a problem within several days of a debt, but in your case I have pressed for the greatest possible delay. However, you must pay now." Then he stood at parade rest. I gave a speech too. I understand. I agree. You have acted fairly and I feel grateful for it. Now hear me out. When we started working together, I told you I would never screw you over. I kept my word. And the fact is, I'm not going to screw you over now either. And with that, I cocked my foot up on the edge of a chair and pulled up my pant leg. I perceived an uncomfortable shuffle from the two gentlemen accompanying me, but without hesitation I reached down into my own combat boot and drew out my weapon, a white envelope. I opened it and I paid them every dollar. And I waited for the lead balls to pulverize my kneecaps, at least. But it didn't happen. With bewildered expressions and appreciative remarks, the men left as uneventfully as they'd entered. And since that day, I haven't sat around waiting for knocks at the door. And the proverbial raven? The raven has come tapping. Ah, nevermore. Nevermore.